And we are live. This is the March 28th meeting of the Node.js modules team. Everyone, you can find the in issue 52, the agenda for today. And within that agenda, there is a doc that we'll be using for keeping notes. In that doc, if everyone who is on the call could please put their name in so that you're marked as present for the meeting. Is there anyone who's on the call right now who could take on the task of taking notes during the meeting? Any volunteers? Without volunteers, I will try to do it, but if any of y'all can help out with this, it's hard for me to do everything. So kicking off the meeting on our agenda, we have a handful of different things. We have approving PRs. We have the meeting notes from the last meeting. Since we don't have quorum, we can't move this forward. Rebecca, this may be an interesting place where we can maybe push that we don't need quorum to land meeting notes as an appendum to our current doc. So maybe I'll make a note for someone to make an action item to follow up on that. For awareness, sorry. There are 3 PRs against core that I wanted to make sure, or 2, that one we already talked about, that I wanted to make sure people are aware of. There's one module, fix Estack error when throwing undefined or null. This is a Semver patch, arguably a bug fix. If you want to put eyes on it, please feel free. Jordan had flagged on it, but I can't dig it up. Timothy is who's on the call. Timothy, can you give us like a very short extra bit of context on this one?
Yeah. So this specific line e.stack was added back when the initial ESM PRs landed. Bradley Mack added it, but no one really knows what it does, so we just kind of removed it, and it's causing issues for undefined or no errors. So, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Thanks, Timothy. So if anyone has thoughts on that, please feel free to chime in on the issue. I'll follow up with Brad and make sure that they're following up on the issue. The next one is issue 18972, loader allow importing WASM modules. So, this is one that's been opened since the 24th of February, so just over a month. This isn't super new, but we haven't discussed it. It was asking for feedback from the WASM group. Lynn, I'm sure this is something that you would have thoughts and opinions on. It does not seem like this is something that is moving forward at any particular pace, but just want to make sure, again, people know that this stuff is happening on core. So some quick announcements. For those of you who are not aware, I opened an issue number 48 to let you all know about the Node Foundation's travel fund. So the Node Foundation has a travel fund. If you are working for an employer who I forget the exact rules, but I think there's rules around your employer not being like a sponsor of the foundation itself. But there are, as long as you fall within certain requirement guidelines, you can apply to the foundation to get travel funds. So we have an upcoming collaborator summit happening just before JSConf EU. So if you were planning to go to JSConf EU and you would like to join us at the collaborator summit and your employer will not be helping to fund your trip, the foundation can help you with flights and accommodations, and all the information is documented in there. It's a really great service. It's really great, especially, students or people who are working as independents. We want to just make sure that everyone who's participating has a chance to be there. I don't know how many people on the call right now or listening are planning to attend JSConf EU, but I would love us to do an in-person modules team meeting during that time if we're able to reach some sort of level of quorum. So yeah, just keep your eyes open. We can maybe start planning something more closer. The next one is the online module summit for April 3rd. So that would be next Tuesday. Brad has been moving forward, we have topics. Brad is not on the call right now, so I'm not sure the exact times, to be honest. Has anyone else been following that issue? Do you know the exact time that the summit's going to be running?
I think he said he wants to shoot for 7 in the morning Pacific.
Okay. And do you know for how long?
He does have an agenda in there. I didn't actually look to see how much it adds up to.
Okay. So, oh, here's the schedule. So this has us going for a couple hours. It's a non-trivial amount of time. So for those of you who are planning to participate, this is creeping up on us. We should probably send an email to the group and make sure that everyone is still, available for that time. So I'm going to post the link in the chat really quickly. Gus Kaplan, John David Dalton, Guy Bedford, Brad Farias, Lynn Clark, myself, and Justin. We're all signed up to do some sort of talk, so we want to probably make sure we can attend. Okay, so next thing up, we have discussions. Membership requirements. This is one that we keep floating past. We didn't end up spending time on it last week. Seeing as how we have less attendance this meeting, it seems apropos to maybe have a slight conversation about this. As time progresses, and this is something that you see a lot in these meetings, participation falls off. With less than a quarter of the group here today, we are a far cry from quorum. I don't think that that's going to block us from getting the work that we want to get done today. But especially as we move closer to wanting to be chartered and actually, own the work that we're doing within the foundation, having some sort of rules around participation is necessary. So some examples of things we can measure are meeting attendance, participation in the repo, participation in votes, and code review. There was a suggestion about potentially allowing people to be members but not count towards quorum, which I have mixed feelings about, creating like specific governance just for this group that's out of line with the rest of the project. I put 10 minutes on the agenda to discuss this. We probably don't need all of it, but I'll just kind of leave it to the floor. Do people think that this is something that we need to start thinking about right now? Is it too early? If we're going to do it, what kind of stuff should we be focusing on? Please, even with the small group, use the raised hand thing, and I'll let you speak. Justin, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just since no one else jumped in that quick. I mean, as somebody who hasn't been involved in the Node processes and is trying to kind of represent the web point of view in this in these meetings, the specific governance about a member who doesn't count to quorum, I wonder if that would kind of apply to me. Like I don't necessarily see, like I want to be a member of this group, but I don't necessarily see my role as like voting on PRs that are going into Node. Right? So whatever you think about that, I defer.
So to just speak directly to that, and then CJ, I'll go to you. That is essentially what the concept of an observer is that we discussed before, and maybe the language wasn't like well defined, but technically an observer is someone who is, a member of the group, would get added when things are added, can attend all the meetings, can participate in all the discussion, because arguably anyone can participate in any of the discussion. It's more an observer can show up to any of the meetings, but that when it comes to an actual quorum vote, their vote is not counted towards the quorum. Now, this gets a little bit weird when we're talking about things landing on core, because theoretically we need quorum not just to the group, but quorum of like core itself, and it would defer to the group when core can't reach quorum. But the idea of the observer would be you're someone who is recognized as a participant in the group. You're welcome to join any of the meetings as you have, but that if it were to come to a vote, you would not be considered one of the heads for us to have quorum to make decisions. CJ, to you?
This week might be a little funky because people are still in Europe following the TC39 meeting. I know that we have people who are very, very engaged in this process who aren't here because they're still in the EU. So we might just punt it out another week and wait for a larger group. I don't know.
That seems reasonable. I think, yeah, I guess, especially if we're going to be talking about attendance and ability to participate, that seems like something that we should have quorum for. Okay, so if no one else has anything else to add, we can end this topic early. Just a last call. Anyone else? Cool. Now that issue is still open. If anyone has things that they would like to add to it, please feel free to chime in the GitHub tracker. I'm just going to make a note. So next one that we have, so we have only 35 more minutes of agenda items scheduled right now. 25 is scheduled for the use cases. We don't have 10 minutes scheduled for this package name map, but we can go over. So I'm still going to keep it at 10 minutes, and Justin, I'll let you start it off. But if we run over, we can run past the 10 minutes if it makes sense. So Justin, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, and sorry, I'm unfamiliar with Zoom. How do I present?
There should be a green button that says share screen.
Ah, the bright green button right in the middle. Okay. Okay. Hopefully this works. I can no longer see the videos, so did that work, or can you guys see the slide there?
I am not personally seeing your slides, unfortunately.
Oh, I forgot a button now.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. I won't go full screen so I can see here. Okay. So I want to talk about package name maps. Package name maps are a kind of new rough proposal that Dominic Denicola and Miles and I and a couple people from the Chrome loader team put together over the last couple months in trying to solve the bearer specifier problem for modules on the web. And one of our definite primary goals is to consider NPM and Node in the proposal and how to increase interop and possibly add some value for Node itself, even outside of web interop. So the essential problem that we're trying to solve is basically how do I use a bare specifier on the web? So somebody is going to want to say, import something from just a name. And they can do this with transpilers on Node or probably with the module flag now on Node. And so to most JavaScript developers who are used to the kind of compilation-based workflows, this is nothing even that exciting. It's just kind of standard how they work. But this ends up blowing up on the web because the web, the HTML spec has reserved these so-called bare specifiers in the spec and said that they're specced to throw right now. So you can only import or export with specifiers that use full URLs or a path, an absolute or relative path. So to import something from Three.js, you would have to use the full path to the file. And while this might work and actually does work today, if you're writing, say, application code that you're not expecting to publish to NPM, and maybe you have a very high confidence of where your modules, where your packages got installed to by NPM, this definitely doesn't work very well for situations where you want to write a module that is consumed by other people because you don't know where your package is going to be installed. And it particularly breaks down in the near future when Node has module support and you want to write a module that is loadable on Node in the web. So the essential problem that we need to solve to support this is we need to turn this name into a path. And we have two pieces of information that we can use to do that. So we imagine this, we have this function called resolve specifier. base URL or referral URL of the module, and we know the specifier we want to resolve. So we want to implement this function. And in the case of 3.js there, we might have our base URL is like an index.js, and the specifier is 3. And so this will look familiar probably to anybody who followed along with the loader spec in the past, and the resolve hooks, and possibly maybe some hooks that are being proposed or thought of for Node now. This is not the type of hook that returns to you, the instantiated module itself or anything, but just turns a name into a path. And so essentially all package name maps is the data required to have a standard fast implementation of resolve specifier. I'm going to get into just a couple of the details to outline what it does, but if you want to look at the proposal and haven't already, it's up on GitHub in Dominic's area there under package name maps. So please load that up. And I'll get into a little bit about what it is concretely so we can talk about it. So a package name map is a JSON file. And the core part of it is that it just lets you describe basically where packages are. So in the previous example that we want to import 3, we have to define what 3 is. And so we just have a packages stanza here, and then we have a 3 section, and we say the main maps to this kind of theoretical module version of 3 that has a top level 3.js file. This should be also familiar looking to anybody who's used many of the userland loaders that have come around over the years. This essentially looks like the config passed to require.js or system.js or something like that. Yeah, so you can have situations where you want to load submodules more than just the main file. And in this case, you can specify the path that a name resolves to separate from its main. And now if you import 3/ and some other path, it knows to resolve 3 to this path and then append the path from the specifier. And then of course you can import or define mappings for multiple packages. And so this gets us started in our road to, how do we support names on the web? But, we know that it's very common for people to have workflows where this wouldn't be quite sufficient. This is kind of standard capability for what we have for a lot of system loaders now. And we know that, when using NPM and possibly other package managers, that they allow for this nesting of packages that if we want to get projects to load natively on the web without having to run through a bundler, we have to support this use case in the file too. So package name maps and what a scope is basically a way to refine or customize the mapping from names to paths and to kind of override that mapping for a particular set of referral URLs. So in this case, if we consider that we have this other package here called 4, and maybe 4 uses 3, but it uses a different version of 3. There was a version conflict when it was installed. So what you can do is say that when my referrer URL or the base URL is prefixed with node module /4, then use this package map here instead of the top level one. And in this one, we override 3. Oh, whoops. And I should have customized this for something. And now when we go to resolve the name 3 from within the package 4, we're going to get a different result for that. And we're going to get the specific nesting overridden package there. So that kind of covers the 2 capabilities of the maps, scopes and packages. And then, of course, you need to be able to specify a map to a web page. A lot of this is, proposed, but still a little bit to be determined in terms of how concrete it is. But we think the best scenario right now is to use a script tag with a type of package map so that you can inline your package map as JSON there, or you can refer to an external file with script source. So to just very briefly kind of cover the concepts that were in the sample code there, there's 2 main ideas that we have here. One is a package, And packages are keyed by package name. And then they have the metadata in them that you need to resolve a package name to a path. So they'll have the path of the package. It will have the subpath, the relative path to the main file, and potentially some other metadata in there depending on how rich we want to make resolution work. And then we have a scope. So a scope is keyed by URL fragment. So scopes are looked up based on the base URL of the module containing the specifier. And they're used to look up a specific name to path mapping. And scopes can nest, and that's how you get this overriding information or behavior. And of course, they inherit from their parent scopes. So resolution, we've kind of taken a couple attempts at writing down a real resolution algorithm, but I think we're still kind of just going to start fresh at some point. So the proposal as it stands doesn't really have a concrete resolution algorithm. But the basic way that it works is that there's two main steps here. First, you need to find the scope that you're in. So you take the current base URL of the module you're in, and you look for prefix matches in these scope stanzas. And so you find a scope whose scope path matches your referrer URL. And then if necessary, you recurse into scope path prefixes from your referrer URL until you can't anymore. And then that gets you a scope. And then the next step is once you have a scope, you need to look up the package metadata for the name that you have to resolve. And you do that by recursing in the other direction, by recursing up. So you look in the packages stanza for a package name that's a prefix of your specifier. And if you find it, then you have the metadata you need. If you don't, you need to recurse up. And then there's the details about how do we construct the URL. So you have a current scope path that you've built up as you've recursed down the scope tree. And then when you found a package, you found a package path. And then you either have the main field or you have the subpath after the package name. And so you piece those together to get the complete URL.
Hey, Justin, just a heads up, we've hit the 10 minutes now.
Okay.
No problem with us doing another 5, but just in case you want to make sure you leave room for questions, I wanted to give you a heads up.
Okay, awesome. I'm basically done here. Some important details. The most important is that the details aren't set in stone. Also, the web has behavior defined for non-bear specifiers, for path specifiers. And it's very unlikely that we're going to apply resolution to paths that begin with, say, / or /. And that it's a goal to support composition, so you can build up a mapping out of multiple mapping files, but we don't quite know how that might land yet. And then last, didn't finish this slide, but it's been said that we can't implement node module resolution on the web because we can't take the overhead of pinging the network and doing the node search. But one interesting way to look at the package name map proposal is that it's a partial serialization of your file system metadata that lets you perform something very close to node module resolution on the metadata synchronously so that you don't have to hit the network. All right, so that's what I have for describing it, and hopefully we have some time for question or conversation.
Great. Justin, is that link for the deck that you just showed us, is that a public-facing link?
Not yet. It can be.
Okay. If you would be open to making that public-facing and including it in the meeting notes, that would be great. The first person with a hand up is John Dalton.
Cool. Is that specifier function, is that a global function?
It's not an actually exposed function. This is the conceptual function that we need to implement to resolve specifiers.
Another thing I was looking at, and this is something I didn't click until you were just describing it, is that this map is very much like a source map where it doesn't have to be human writable. It's just something, I think maybe it might sell better if you say like, hey, like tools can generate this. That way, like it could implement well, if it's index without an extension versus an extension, it could have all those variations put in there in the map generated, and then it would know how to resolve them based on that.
So, yeah, I mean, the web is a big place. It might even be, it's definitely like more kind of diverse in terms of developer opinions and styles than Node. And I think that trying to keep it at least a little bit handwritable for some is important. The other thing is this is going to be on the critical path for loading resources to like render your initial parts of your page.
Right.
And the more kind of flexibility that we have in terms of resolving specifiers, the more metadata we're going to need to put in the map. And this might make it a lot bigger. So there are certain capabilities that I think there's going to be pushback on to be able to keep the mapping simpler, even if generated by tools.
Yeah, my main thing was that like tools could pop in there and do this, just because, I mean, you pull down an NPM package and then you've got 200 deps in there, and then I was just thinking like, oh, I'm going to have to specify every single mapping of that. Like that's a nightmare. But
I think it's very clear that NPM could generate
a map file for it
as you install. You could probably generate one from the package lock.
Yep.
One thing to quickly add, and then to Rebecca, you would be able to do deep searching into modules. It would be just that you wouldn't be able to drop the file extension or load specific folders, but you could do like lodash/module.mjs or .js, or module/folder/folder/folder/module. So as long as you're explicit about file extension and you're not specifying a directory, it would just work with the current setup.
And we talked on, there were some issues filed online where we figured even with the current proposal, you can figure out how to support subdirectories.
Rebecca?
So yeah, it's worth noting that in the very near term, like the next 3 to 3 months or so, NPM intends to have an install path for ESM for browsers that does not use Node modules. And like if something like this were to happen, that would be the place where it would generate that at install time. While I don't think we could produce it from a package lock, or at least not sufficient for full cross compatibility, because as Miles says, you have to write it in a specific way for it to work in both places. Whereas the installer can actually like look at how it's written and produce the mapping if it needs to,
right.
Just by looking at the JavaScript. So, like, if this were to get standardized, yeah, I would want NPM to generate these files when it does the install, because that should just be transparent and like, yeah, load the standard source map for your assets folder.
For web address. Oh, sorry, your audio cut out for me at least for a second, so I didn't hear your last bit.
Just that we are going to be generating. If this were to become a standard, we would be generating this as part of your install. So it should be transparent to end users. I agree. Trying to fit, like, to me, this feels like the sort of thing that should not have a lot of logic in it, that should be pretty dumb. And that if you want more logic, that it's probably timed, like, there needs to be an escape valve, and this doesn't provide one. Like, my biggest concern about this is being used as well, instead of having loader hooks, let's have this, because, Gmail can't use loader hooks. And it's like, well, yes, having a fast path, this feels like an optimization to me of a general problem, rather than, and like, if we had loader hooks, we could, in fact, try this out and go, does this fast path work well? Is this a good solution? Without them, we can't.
I don't, intimately know the entire history of the loader spec, but it did seem to fail, at least, after many, many, many years. And I don't know how likely we are to get something like loader hooks. I think there's been, at least from my point of view, there's been more like a warmer reception to this idea. Our kind of working theory was that people aren't going to be able to write like interesting loader hooks on their own like that often, and that mostly there's going to be a loader hook that consumes a file very much like this, and that's going to be like the biggest kind of use case. And then from the implementers' point of view that we've talked to, they're very wary of imperative loader hooks.
It's different on the Node side, of course.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take a moment to interrupt. We have gone quite a bit over time, and if we want to stick to the amount of time that we had for the use cases, we'll have to move on. Brad, was there a quick point that you wanted to bring up, or was this getting more down the loader hook?
I just wanted to clarify something. So when we talk about loader hooks, usually we're talking about the request data hook, not the WhatWG loader, which is an open issue on the HTML standard that's stalled because of a perpetual chicken and egg problem. They refuse to move forward with the hook because they require userland experimentation. Just as NPM people are stating, we can't experiment because we don't have the hooks. So there's no way for us to progress on it because we are blocked by something that we cannot do in either direction.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest that because the whole purpose of us going through use cases was to avoid getting into super deep technical discussion, that we avoid this technical discussion for now. But I do think that we will see, hopefully, the need for hooks as we go through these use cases. And perhaps with the various stakeholders that we have in the room and stakeholders that we talk to, maybe trying to figure out how to prototype something like hooks is a way that we actually could be testing this out in userland. And that's something we can explore after. So John, do you want to kick off talking about use cases?
Hello. Yeah, sure. Okay. If I share my screen, I can't switch between desktops. All right. Would you like to open the document and then I can just talk through it since...
I would prefer not to screencast because I'm also taking notes, and doing all those things are difficult.
Well, then I will look.
Here's the link in the chat, though. And on the bottom, you can click screen share.
Cool.
Share screen.
I'm just going to see if this works. Screen share. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see my screen when I switch desktops?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sweet, so now you see the document, the Word document.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so last week we went over a handful of these use cases, the ones up here without names associated with them. Afterwards, some more use cases were then filled in, so I figured we could just go through some of them. I don't know if you wanted me to just like read them out loud or step through them. How many people have actually reviewed the document? I can't see hands, so I'll just assume yay or nay. Lots? No? Okay. So I'll start with Jordan's. It says, Francis has a large application and wants to be able to granularly migrate from CJS to ESM. This is talking more about doing it, let's see, piece by piece, it looks like, syntax at a time, without forcing to change their own code base and without creating a breaking change sim for a major change. He's not here to talk about it, so I can't really go into this, but my question there was how to do that, migrate syntax at a time without it being a breaking change, because syntax tends to be a breaking change. So that my question there is just how to do that. I needed some more clarification on that.
John, if I can make a quick suggestion.
Sure,
yeah. A couple people on the panel who are in the meeting right now who have put in a bunch. Rob Palmer, for example,
let's do that.
Perhaps we could use theirs because they can.
Yeah, cool. That's right. So they can speak to it. All right. So Rob's is right here, Rob. All right, Rob, I'll let you talk to this just because you said this was mostly about a loader specification that you have at your office or your job. And so I don't have enough context here to say like what each one of these features are.
Sure. So I guess all of these come from the position of an aspiring Node user. So that's the destination. And these are capabilities that we've found to be useful in other module systems. And my assumption here is that these are generic use cases. And so, let's find out if Node deems these to be useful in general. So the first one is that a particular convention for avoiding the need for fully relative paths inside a package. So it's common to want to link to some deep path within your own package, but you don't want to use the dot dots to go all the way to the top and all the way back down again, because that's a refactoring hazard.
Correct. Okay.
Rob, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that we're getting a lot of feedback from your mic. I'm going to try muting you for a second just to confirm. And I'm confirming that, Rob, your mic is real hot. It's very hard to actually, I just unmuted you and I'm getting it again. Do you have another mic you could use, or is it possible for you to just go off of your computer speaker? Or maybe try playing with the mic connection a little bit. You're muted right now, as a heads up. And it is very loud, sorry.
So
I can try holding it a little bit further away.
No, I think it's the connection itself.
Okay, I'm going to try and dial in on audio. I think I suggest going ahead for now.
Okay, so we'll move over to someone else's and then we'll come back to you.
okay, but just on that note there, we can relate this to a common JS package at the moment that does something like this, and it's called require alias or module alias, and it allows specifying shorthands to then reference longer paths. And I think Webpack has a plugin that also does something like that too. So if we're looking for things in the ecosystem that currently do something like that, there's a Webpack plugin, and then there's that module that remaps require paths. Okay, so fine. We'll go to Justin's, a little bit lower. Okay, so these are web scenario and web use cases. Let's see. John, a web developer, wants to create a module that imports dependencies.
Yeah, so they're mostly concerned about specific. How's my mic coming through?
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, they're concerned around specific cases that we would really like to enable, where we don't require tooling necessarily to map from kind of a node world to a web world, where things just kind of naturally work with native support. So the first one is simply that John wants to write a module that imports any dependencies and works natively on the web without using any build tools. This works today with paths, but it doesn't yet work with names. So it's interesting to consider this from a node point of view.
Can you fill that in with that kernel there, where that's the piece that you want, which is not with paths, but with the node resolution? Because that would help a little bit. Because when I first saw that too, I was like, well, people could already do this today. I have an ES package in Node that has paths that also works in the browser. So
yeah, I mean, I wanted to stay away from the how a little bit and
okay.
Focus on the what. I mean, maybe I can.
I was just saying more, not necessarily the how, but really the kernel there, I think is that package stuff, right? Where you're like, you have a bare import and you want to be able to, is that the gist? Or because I mean,
I think in this particular use case, and maybe I should just clarify that, John doesn't care how. Maybe he doesn't really care about names versus paths, but he just wants to do it, right?
Okay.
And it works today on the web, but making something that does this the same way in the web and Node is currently a little difficult.
I could also see that going into a little bit more of aligning Node. Like, so there's a discussion about like fetch in Node as well, and if this person wrote an ES module that also required that API, how would that work?
Yes.
Transitioning over. So that's kind of a broader topic too.
Yeah. Let's see the next one with Sean. This is kind of a expansion of the first one. So she wants to use modules from NPM on the web natively without doing any source transformations. Maybe she likes her DevTools editing capabilities or something. But she does want the other tools that she uses to understand where the dependencies are. So the IDE should be able to open a dependency if they do command click or whatever. Their linter should be able to pull in or locate files to make sure that the imports are actually valid. The build system would have to find files in order to bundle them and whatnot. So this speaks to the ability of tools to agree upon what a specifier means.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the next one is about doing things in situations where you might not have build tools available at all. Amy just wants to write a JS bin that uses some modules from NPM. Currently, the most viable way to do this is to use like unpackage, which will do some module rewriting for you. Right?
Yes.
Down in cases where there's node-specific things in modules. The next one is Jeff here wants to deploy his app to production, but he would like to take advantage of a CDN for common modules to either get them to serve to take the bandwidth hit, or to have highly cached common modules out there from URLs. So he might want to transform his graph to point to modules. The next one, Alex is just a library author who wants to write a package that's intended to be used on the web and Node. So it needs to be compatible with both. And then finally, this is kind of something that just came up today when we were trying to use modules from NPM. Sarah would like to use dev builds of modules at dev time and prod builds at prod time, probably without rewriting her source.
So does that speak to something like Webpack, which has a dev and prod mode? And
so I'm trying to leave the tools out.
Sure,
of it,
yeah. I'm
right?
just
like you would like to do this. Right. Yeah. Actually, when this came up, I imagine the package name maps could be used to solve this, because you could write a package, you could generate a package name map for dev and for build and just use
I see.
Okay. Now, I guess, Justin, you're looking for a solution that works for both the web and Node, because like on Node end, we see a lot of people doing like process.env and checking whether or not production, and potentially doing like statements and stuff like that. That doesn't really scale.
Yeah, we're currently submitting PRs to like Redux to like guard the process.env check, so it'll load on the web. Because currently, like, that's the only thing holding those types of things back.
Oh, so they just need more UMD.
Or the module version of UMD.
Right, yeah.
Okay, cool. I think Rob is called back in. Rob, do you want to see if new mic is a little happier?
Yeah, is new mic better for you?
Oh yeah, it sounds
Fantastic.
Great. Okay, good. All right, so I think we've covered the first one. The second one was for Thomas, which was about being able to use aliases for dependencies. And I think that package name maps summarize that one very well. The third one for Peter is that not only can you imagine aliases to get into a package, but you can also imagine then some kind of indirection so that you have only named entry points into that package. So I know that in Node today, there is no real way to defend files that you ship. If you ship a directory structure inside a package, then anyone is able to deep link into any file that you publish.
Yes.
So
React has had that problem.
Yeah, yes. And so sometimes you want to ship files that are actually used internally and are considered in implementation details. And so, the concept of named entry points into a package comes up.
There's an interesting parallel there between some of the conversations happening about private class fields as well, or just the idea that anything in JavaScript shouldn't just be default public.
I think maybe in conceptually, yes, about being able to have integrity of public API. But I think in terms of implementation wise, they're covering two quite distinct cases.
So I do know of a very early proposal somewhere to kind of make capabilities or friend packages or friend modules between modules, so that a module can explicitly only be loadable by some other module. So this might be interestingly solvable at the TC39 level.
Yeah, I think Mike Samuel's bringing that to the May meeting.
Could you add that as a like a note below that?
Yeah, that would be very interesting. So moving on, then Charles is about having when you're running in, say, in test mode, being able to have resolution that differs from production mode. This is to support a convention-based mocking system where normally files are called whatever.js, but in test mode, they get loaded from a .test.js otherwise. So I think for example, the existing name resolver hook, I think would satisfy this use case. Okay, and then finally, our last one is Vlad, which is about ensuring that we declare all of our dependencies explicitly. And it's possible in regular vanilla packages today to accidentally in your modules depend on something inside your node modules that you didn't ask for directly. And this is because dependencies can have dependencies. And so this is saying that it is useful to at least have some mode, maybe for production, maybe only for development, where it effectively will not load things that you've not declared up front.
So almost like a CSP kind of thing, right? Where you can say, allow this, not allow.
It's solved by package name maps.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so long as there was no way to link physically into the destination of the name map, and to force, for example, relative specifiers to not break out of the current package, then I think that could be simulated there.
So, Rob, just a quick question. I'm forgetting what the first one you talked about, but are the majority of your use cases handled through specifier resolution?
Yes, I think the package name maps and a combination of the resolver hook and package name map does seem to provide solutions for each of these use cases. I just wanted to be very clear on the problems that we're solving, so that we can ensure they map forwards. Yeah,
absolutely. I was just it just seemed to be like a consistent mechanism that, like, if done right, would allow for all your use cases. So I just want to make sure I was on the same page.
I mean, just to be clear, I think it's awesome the direction that this group is going.
And in case you missed it from the chat, Rebecca says, npm config global style true provides bare specifiers, can't require transitive depths today incidentally.
Okay, that's very cool.
Can you add that to the document as well?
Yeah, I'll add a note.
Okay.
It's one of those things.
Rebecca, could you expand on how that global style true, like, that doesn't affect Node's resolution algorithm at all, right?
No, it affects how NPM installs your modules. So your Node modules folder will only have your direct so it reduces deduplication. Basically, there's a price associated with it currently. If you want a flat install, you can't have this without something to the resolution algorithm. And so this is where it's like becomes more complicated. And it's why it's not the default today. If we had some other way of achieving this, then I would be inclined to have global style be the default. Like when we have asset, then it starts to, when we have an ability to install, flat dependencies in addition to your Node dependencies, that's say things for your web app, then I start to go, well, maybe Node should do this. So what global style does is it installs your direct dependencies as separate folders in your Node modules. All of their dependencies are installed flat inside of each of them. So it's one layer deep. Rather than the old NPM 2 style where it was a arbitrarily deep tree, basically as deep as possible. This mirrors the way when you install things in your globals directory, it installs it in the same way. So like if you look in your global node modules, you'll see that there are no transitive dependencies in it. At any rate, yeah, I'll add a note there.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Just so everyone knows, we're down to the last 5 minutes. Do people think at this point it might make sense for us to just break early and, put the word out to people, hey, let's all keep working on this document and maybe earmark more time for next week? I only did 25 minutes this week. Maybe we make the majority, if not the entire meeting, 2 weeks from now focused just on this. Does that seem reasonable to people?
Yeah, I have one use case that I'd like to bring up,
Yes,
but it's not mine, but it's one that I think speaks to me more. And this is one by Jordan, and it says Carl is unable to use ESM in their code because the company is still unwilling to change the coding style and workflow. However, they want to use Eugene's ESM only package. They are able to access it with require and make use of it both while on an old version of Node that lacks ESM support and after upgrading to a newer version of Node that has ESM support. That use case seems very spot on with the ESM loader that I've written. And I wonder, I think that's going to be something for a transition period where you're going to see people wanting to do something like that. So I'm just going to keep an eye on this here because it is very similar to what I'm doing now. So
to speak to that, one of the things that I had mentioned earlier in the manifesto that I think speaks to this is allowing people to publish multi-mode modules, whatever the mode is. I was a little bit too specific in my original language of it, and specifically where they say Eugenia's ESM only package. And I do think that for core, we need to find a balance as to how much we're trying to optimize and help people for. I think we need to allow and enable people to create bridges, but we don't need to make all of them. I know, for example, being able to require ESM, since we have an async loader, isn't really possible from a fundamental standpoint, but we're getting really into the weeds. But I think that the phrasing here, especially that it's explicitly ESM only, I don't want to say won't fix, but I think that there are solutions that can allow module authors more flexibility. But if module authors want to only publish ESM, I'm not sure if that should be Node's responsibility to pre-pave the bridge.
Well, I think the bridge is already there, from user land, but I just thought that was just a on the nose description of the scenario that I've been working on.
Absolutely.
So I dig that. I'd still like to, based on that, I'd like to monitor that though, just because it does touch on things like asynchronous versus synchronous loading of modules for things like CJS interrupt. So that's all. I just thought that was super cool.
Cool. We've got 1 minute left. CJ?
Just to sharpen our focus here a little bit, I think the job of this group working through these use cases is to figure out what the common paths are that our users are going to want to do that we are going to want to make easy. And if we make and our secondary goal should be to make the more unusual paths possible, maybe possible through user-land solutions like using JDD's ESM to do this. But our job is to discriminate between what are the bread and butter cases that absolutely have to be easy for our users, and then what are the things that are okay if it's a little bit of work, but people can do them. So some things are going to be possible but tricky, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Brad, you have your hand up. Last one for the call.
Sure. I just wanted to ask some clarity on using required to load ESM. Do you mean without any changes today? Because I know in the past we were okay with some I guess, breaking changes to when you require ES modules.
The use case by Jordan doesn't really go into that. From my opinion, is that it's doable today. It gets kind of into implementation wise, but what you do is you lock down the module that's returned, so its exports and module properties are frozen, and that adds a little bit of insurance against people monkey patching the returned object. So then you just you parse and you validate synchronously in the order that you would normally asynchronously. And since Node file operations can be sync, it just shakes out. Normally, what you have to do if you then want CommonJS interop is have a hybrid mode where you can validate exports at runtime. So it requires a little bit of hybrid and spec approaches, but can be doable.
Okay, great. We are over time at this point, and unfortunately, Jeremiah, I'm not trying to skip on you, but I actually have another meeting that I need to get to, and I'm hold the keys to this. So Jeremiah, if your thing's like 1 minute, maybe get that in really quickly, but just as a heads up, I'm running late.
So loading ES modules in using require or doing it synchronously is absolutely not possible if top level await is a thing.
So I support that as well, and it's still doable. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I support it, and I support top level await. I think top level await though could be used as a band-aid to try to work around the synchronous gap between CommonJS and ESM. So I don't necessarily think it should be its driving force though. The main thing for top level await is convenience with like CLIs. And so I think the proposal by Miles, which is variant 3C, which is as long as your module doesn't have any exports, you get top level await. That's how I support it. Works well.
Okay, and with that, we're gonna close up for the day. Thank you everyone for your time. Just one more time, if you have not put your name into the notes document, please do. That's how we keep track of who's shown up. I'll quickly check YouTube. I don't see any questions right now, so we'll move forward. Thank you everyone again. I'm gonna end the meeting now. Have a good day.